Hi, welcome to Bigger Possibilities, a podcast from Schultz and Williams, where we're going to explore what's possible for nonprofit organizations and the world through leadership, purpose, and progress. My name is Craig Shelley. I'm the CEO here at Schultz and Williams. In each of our episodes, we're going to sit down with leaders and change makers, talk about the real stories behind the work, what shaped them, what they've learned, where they see things going. We're in these conversations constantly, and it's honestly a favorite part of my job. So we're excited to record these conversations and bring them to you via this podcast. Today, I'm joined by William Goodloe, is the CEO of Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, or SEO. William, so great to have you here.
No, it's my pleasure, Craig. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Let's start, with your story. What originally drew you to working in nonprofit organizations? How did that journey begin, and what brought you here?
Well, it's an interesting story, at least from my standpoint, is that I graduated from college and I went into advertising and sales with consumer products companies, first Procter& and Gamble, and then Kraft, and then Horning. And a friend of mine who had become a lawyer from college, he went on to law school, started practicing law and decided it wasn't for him. And he and another friend started a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. And they got a contract to bring the organization to New York to help prepare kids in foster care for independent living. So we started hanging out. I won't go through all the details. It was the '80s, so going out and drinking, having dinner. And he slowly learned what I was doing. And he said, you could fundraise to supplement this government contract we have. And I said, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about fundraising. He said, no, fundraising and sales. I was in sales, a sales manager there, very similar. So I decided to do it as a consultant. I kept my job, and get this, the pay was $300 a month. So, but I was drawn to it. At the time, I was selling to the buyers of department stores and mass merchants, Corningware, Corel and Pyrex and Corningware dishes. And I got a lot more satisfaction about helping kids be independent coming out of foster care than selling pots and pans and dishes. So started doing that. I went to the old Foundation Center, free internet on Fifth Avenue, learned about fundraising from foundations, took a course at the Learning Annex, again, that's not around anymore, and, cobbled together proposals and started fundraising and had some success because it was a unique program, and the selling skills really did come in handy in positioning the work we did and how we distinguished ourselves in the marketplace. Eventually, we had the opportunity to go to New York State for a larger contract, which I was very involved in developing. It quadrupled the size of the funding we were getting, and allowed me to actually quit my job and become the vice president of the New York region of the Center for Youth Development. That was the name of the organization. So that's my story of getting into fundraising.
It's funny you mentioned the Foundation Center. We're in the midst of a project with Candid right now, which is what the foundation eventually turned into. And I think often about that, going down to their office on Fifth Avenue and learning how to write a grant, and then it's like, not that, pay has come so far in the sector, but right. Yeah. I remember my first job in a nonprofit organizing Cub Scout packs in the South Bronx. I made $19,000 a year, and I thought it was, all the money in the world, right? Like, so we've come a long way from $300 a week, but still.
Yeah, $300 a month.
$300 a month. Oh, wow. I was on easy street compared to you. All right. Well, that's excellent. And I think, again, I think like so many of us, didn't go into this with intention, but once we found it, stayed here with a great deal of intention. I'm curious, like, was there a moment, an experience kind of early on that really sort of shaped how you think about leadership?
Um, I think I always sort of wanted to be a leader. I think, as a CEO, you have to want it to become it, and study and look at other leaders. I remember when I was in sales, and you go to sales meetings, and the key folks in a lot of sales organizations, especially B2B sales, the key folks are what's known as brand managers. And they would sit in the headquarters, do the competitive analysis, and look at opportunities in the marketplace. And then you'd go to the annual sales meetings or biannual and they'd make presentations to the sales force and say, this is the new product we're coming out with, and this is how you sell it. And I always, these are the features, these are the benefits. And I always remember thinking, that sounds like an interesting job, not executing the sale, but developing the products and the services that are going to be sold. And I just wanted to be on that end as well. So it goes back to that. And even in college, I kind of ended up being the president of my fraternity chapter, where you look at the current person and you have ideas and you talk about your ideas with other people, and they seem to make sense. So you have to want it, and I kind of always wanted it.
Yeah. No, sure. And I don't think people think of it in that terms, right? But if you don't want it, it's not a thing you're going to enjoy, and it's not a thing you're probably going to achieve. And I also think too, like I think early on some of my leadership stuff, I remember working at summer camp, and sordid tale, we got in trouble for a bunch of things we weren't supposed to do. I stopped doing them. Several nights later, a bunch of my friends did them anyway. I got yelled at. I was like, hey, I wasn't even there. And his point of view is, he goes, what did he say? He said something about like, leadership isn't just about what you do, it's about what you influence other people to do as well. And he goes, I'm expecting you
Mm-hmm.
to get them to behave the right way, not just you behave right. But anyway, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's amazing how you pick these things up as you go. And I don't know about you, I certainly got a lot wrong and probably still get a lot wrong. But, what are some things early on that you got wrong about leadership?
Wow. How much time do we have? So, I thought I could preside. I remember when I first became CEO of SEO, which I've been here almost 25 years now. I was friends with a few other CEOs, and I remember one in particular. I asked, "How long do you think it'll take to get the organization exactly where I want it to be?" And then it'll be set. Basically, I didn't say the word I could coast, but I was implying it. And he said he was a mentor of mine. He said never. So,
It's probably true.
and truer words were never spoken. You can never rest.
Yeah.
You have to stay curious. You have to stay engaged. You cannot just preside over the organization. You've got to get in there and understand what people on the front lines were doing or are doing. And so much of what you want done or what needs to be done has to be done by others, and you just can't do it all. And understanding that and hiring is a key part of it, and hiring people who are aligned already with your way of thinking, with your vision and your mission, and will take it to the next level. I mean, I've been fortunate in having a couple of those people who took it to a level that I hadn't even imagined, and programmatically, that is, or even operationally. I'm like, wow, this is really great. I wouldn't have thought of that. So that's another key part of leadership. And I say, once you start overruling people and saying, nah, that's not a great decision, or no, let's do it another way. If you do that too many times, it's the wrong person in the
Yeah.
job. So,
Yeah. No, it's interesting too. Like, and I think I was just coaching with somebody earlier today on this point of like, I think one of my challenges early on for sure was just assuming that everybody else thought or would react to leadership the way that I did, right? So it's like you manage people the way you want to be managed. It's like, well, no, you've got to understand how they want to be led and how they want
that's
to
a great point.
collaborate. Um, and then it's funny that point around like, when do I get to the point where I get to preside? I think until you've done some leadership jobs, right? Like it looks like it's like the duck on the water, right? Like it looks like it's an easy job. Like that dude is just presiding, that woman is just chilling, like it's great. You don't see like, oh no, there's like this constant churn, and it never does go away. So, one of the things I think that's I mean, it's not unique to, but it's very specific to the nonprofit sector is like we're trying to solve complex challenges, right? Like, so we're not leading organizations that make widgets, right? So, I feel like what does leadership look like and in our sector specifically, when you're focused on complex challenges, what does that look like to you?
Um, you have to always be on and always be engaged and always listening, because people are always watching. I remember one time I came into the office early on. I was executive director of a group, the Inner City Scholarship Fund within the Archdiocese of New York. I had something on my mind. I can't even remember. It's personal. I'm thinking. I was in my thoughts, and I walked back to my office. And later on, word got back to me. I hadn't said good morning to one of the team members who I walked by. Uh, did I do something wrong? Did William mad at me? Maybe was it that finance report I prepared for him happened to be the finance person yesterday, and I realized people are always watching. You always have to be on. You always have to be engaged. That's one of the things I learned early on. Also, it's you have to get information from multiple sources because the reality is, look, I did it when early in my career. We all have bosses. You manage up. You can, you put the best spin. I don't want to be pejorative, but you put the best spin on information. So the more data points you can get, and even your managers are getting spin from their staff. So it's important to do skip meetings, to visit sites where the work is being done, to walk around. They have a theory in business school management by walking around, just walking around, having conversations with people, really learn about the nuts and bolts. And besides what you learn about it, people really get to appreciate that you're really interested. You're truly interested in them and the work they're doing every day, and letting them know that they're appreciated. That goes a long way. And if there's a personal story, for me, we work in this space of closing opportunity gaps. And I have a personal story where it means something to me. I grew up in the projects. I got lucky and, well, I worked hard, so I won't call it all luck, but I did attend one of the exam schools in New York, Brooklyn Tech. And I didn't realize until literally 20 years later how big a break that was once I got into the space I'm in. And talking about that, how there was so much talent in my neighborhood, but they just didn't have the opportunity and a rigorous education to be exposed and to do well after public school. So all of those things. And the last thing I'll mention, it's important to be, physically fit because it's a physical job. So
Yeah.
you gotta kind of be in shape and be physically fit and take care of yourself physically in leadership roles too.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think that's a good, I mean, they're all great points, but like that last one is like one people overlook, right? Like you don't think about that, but it's like, it's kind of an endurance sport. And if you're not built for endurance, like you've got to, that doesn't happen. You don't just wake up and have stamina, right? Like you've got to actually pay attention to your body and what you do. And then it's funny you talk about that idea of like people take the weight of you say good morning or you don't in a different way. I scheduled a meeting just offhand with somebody that I wouldn't normally talk to, but I was curious about a point of view about something just today. And I got online and she basically was like, I've been panicking all week. I thought you were firing me. And I was like, oh my God, like, you forget. And
There
I'm
you
like, oh
go.
no, like I'm just like had a stupid question. And I figured I should just get on a call with you and ask you. And they're receiving it in a different way because it's like, oh no, the boss. So it's funny to like, you got to remember that everything you do is going to have some impact on somebody, particularly in nonprofits, because people care so much about the work
Mhm.
that it's like they care about you and they care about how they're received. One of the things is like hard decisions, right? Like you're constantly making decisions, constantly making choices. You don't have to maybe name names or get too specific, though you're welcome to. But what's some of the hardest decisions you've made as a CEO?
Um, oh, there's a lot of them. I think exiting certain programs, and where we've had to, when a program wasn't self-sufficient, we've had to um, not no longer do it. And of course, staff reductions. Those are very difficult decisions where you're really stewarding, you're entrusted by the board with the organization's health and well-being and long-term sustainability. So you've got to make decisions with a long-term view. So there have been times, I'll give you an example, um, where we had programs. It's a scholars program now. It's been under a few different names, where we work with kids from sixth grade through college graduation. And ultimately, we stopped working with middle school students and deciding what will be the best use of the limited resources that we have. And it's in looking at the return on the investment. You hate to be so numbers oriented, but that's how you measure impact. You got to measure it. We really felt that the best entry point, the best investment of our time and resources was to begin in high school. There are a lot of other middle school students. So that middle school program, uh, we exited it, and the staff who worked on it, we gave plenty of notice. We want to be as compassionate as possible in those cases. And other times we've launched programs. We thought there would be funding available for it. It just didn't work out or either it started out well and then it dried up, or over time it didn't. So if it's not sustainable, if we can't find people other than us who think it's a good idea, and that's a key criteria for me, we've got to develop programs that others think are worth funding, and that's having an impact, and that distinguish ourselves where we distinguish ourselves in the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's that point of like, I make it a lot with folks, and I don't think people always think in this terms of like, if there's not, like, people often will blame, like, if they have a program and they think it's a great idea and there's no funding available, like, that's the funder's fault, right? Like, that's how they look at it. But I'm like, I actually think that's like a reflection of like, no, if you can't articulate this in a way that the community, a funder, somebody who cares will care, then either you don't need the program or you're doing something wrong, right? You have to,
Mhm.
but yeah, but leadership's all about those types of choices of like, what do you do? And often what you don't do is much more difficult. And certainly any people decisions, there's inevitably, if you're a leader in an organization, you're going to have to part companies with employees. And it's just like, even when you totally know it's the right move for the organization and maybe they even quote unquote deserve it, it's still hard. And if it's not hard on you, then you still
Always.
with you as a leader. Um, sometimes these hard decisions, like they end up in like this sort of point between like ambitious organizations, we're going to change the world, right? Like we're all here in one way or another because we're trying to change the world. That's how we got to this sector, versus like the realities of like, okay, we've got to do these things, make this payroll be sustainable. How do you balance that, right? Like, it's a lot of the hard decisions come from that, but like on a day-to-day basis, how are you balancing like altruism, ambition with like, okay, we still have to like make sure the bathrooms are clean, right? Like,
Yes. um, it's like our own personal lives. You have to be a good financial steward of the donor's monies, and you can't spend more than you have, and you have to be effective with the money you do spend. So you don't want to spread yourself or your organization's funding too thin. And the example I gave before about let's concentrate in a more defined area, less of an area, because we can do more and generate better impact with the population we serve by not spreading ourselves across, what's that, 9 years, or no, more like 6 + 4, 10 years. Let's limit it to 6 years or 8 years. So those types of decisions, where you figure out where you can have the greatest impact with the available funding. And what I've tried to do, not always successfully, is get the funding first before you expand into a particular area. So I'd rather be understaffed and say, we have the money, now we've got to build up our staff, than overstaffed, than have the staff, have the program, and then hope that or count on having to find the money. Because when you do it that way, the second way, it's much more of a challenge. And then you may end up backing yourself into a situation where you've got to make tough decisions, staffing decisions, or cutting program decisions. So much better to secure the funding for a plan and then build up the expenses commensurate with that.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a boss years ago. I stopped saying it for a while around the Obama's first campaign because he used to say, "He's like, hope is not a strategy," right? Like that was his big thing when he'd be like, "Hope is not a strategy." Then I'm like, all right, well, President Obama's kind of leaning on this hope thing. Maybe I shouldn't say that so much, but it remains true. It's like, it is not I hope someone's going to fund it. I hope this is going to happen. That's not a strategy.
No, no.
What's like, think about sort of moments in your career, I'd be curious, like just sort of a moment, a leadership moment that, changed how you operate, either a decision you had to make or leadership you had to provide, or maybe even leadership you received that kind of changed the way you operate.
Um, I think what I talked a little bit about earlier, uh, the perspective of looking back on my life and how much is circumstances that we're born into and other things that happen early in life that we have no control over. And it really made it personal for me with SEO, where we want to close these opportunity gaps. But even maybe more importantly, is to close the information gap and make sure when we focus on young people, that young people are aware of the opportunities available, but just as importantly, aware of the preparation that's necessary to take advantage of those opportunities. It's like, when you're in elementary school, a second grader may say, I want to be an astronaut. This is top of mind now, of course,
Yeah.
with Artemis. Um, but now making them aware of these are the steps required to be an astronaut. So if they decide not to take them, they know going in, or if they decide to take them, what's required. So that experience where I was fortunate to be exposed early on to a very rigorous education, and it gave me many more options because I was exposed to rigorous education and people going into a wide variety of careers where I could match my interests with my career. And it also helped me explain to some of our supporters, our funders, our partners better why our mission and why the work we do, it can have such an impact. And really, it makes America better. I mean, if you think about it, in sports, it's the ultimate meritocracy where everyone kind of knows, look, if you want to play Major League Baseball or football, you kind of start at a certain place. You got to go to practice. You got to work out. You got to go to the weight room. There are certain things the coaches, it's not a secret. The coaches tell you what you have to do, and the cream sort of rises to the top. Some people, you can do the same exact thing, but get different results. Some people, it's not for them to put in that type of effort, but it's much more transparent. And that's what we try to do in careers and in education is make that information more available, more transparent, and then folks can decide what they want to do with that information.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's taken, my kids are 18 and 17 now. So, but like reliving or watching them sort of live and like at some of those decision points, like really made me realize to your point, like, yeah, it matters. You're going to be presented with opportunities that are out of your control based on your circumstances, good or bad. How you react to them, that is the thing you can control. And right, like there was definitely some points where I decided, okay, I don't want to work that hard. I guess I'm not going to be a second baseman for the Mets, right? Like, that
Right,
would be
right.
right. Like, um, but anyway, but it's right to be able to, yeah. All right. So, we call this podcast, bigger possibilities. So I want to just zoom out a little bit. I'd be curious, you've been at this for a minute. You see lots of leaders out in the field leading other organizations, even within your organization. Where do nonprofit leaders need to be bolder right now?
Mhm. Not being limited. Nonprofit leaders can be bolded in not being limited by the way we've always done things. So to think bigger, think what's possible, think of big ideas, especially now with technology, making more and more gains. How can we expand our impact in a more efficient way? And just in general, the world is getting more efficient. Companies are merging, buying one another, and we have to adapt. All nonprofits will probably not survive. So the ones that do are going to be able to adapt, to pivot, to utilize technology. AI, of course, is the obvious one, but other technology in other ways and to look at both the external factors, because the world in which we're operating in is changing. So how do we adapt to the current needs of whatever it is, whatever population we're serving, and so think services and programs, I think, first, and then think donors and think funders, because to be sustainable over time, you've got to be delivering on the promise you're making to the population you're serving, and distinguishing yourself in the marketplace. Is sort of a business term, but I'll use it just to keep the conversation going. Distinguish yourself among others by the work that you do, but yeah, thinking bigger and being real with funders. I mean, look, I'm on the foundation board, so I know that funders can sometimes be unrealistic, and to push back in a respectful way when it's necessary. And we have and went through a lot of sales training early in my career when I was in sales, and there's a method we use called feel, felt, found. And I'll give you the short version. First you agree, you validate what someone said when you disagree with what they're saying, or it's an obstacle you want to overcome. Yeah, I understand exactly how you feel. Many others, you may even say myself, I felt the same exact way. So that's the feel and the felt. However, what we found over time, so you validate them, you agree with them, but then you get to why there's another way of looking at things. One, with funders, sometimes you think, well, let me fund you for a little while, and then you'll find replacement funding for that. Yeah, that sounds good in theory, but there's less pushback around general support. So things like that, where it's an opportunity to educate funders and to make it a real partnership, where some of our stoners, we call them partners, they get as much out of supporting SEO and seeing the achievements of the young people as we do. So converting that to a partnership, instead of being on the other side of the table, opposite sides of the table, being on the same side of the table. And how do we attack this problem together? And the last thing I'll add is, part of that partnership is looking at funders, whether it's individuals, corporations, foundations, as a resource beyond money. I mean, there's the thought partnership element of it as well. And this includes board members in particular, especially those who have reached a certain stature. They've dealt with similar issues. There's so many issues in the nonprofit world that are transferable or similar to issues in the for-profit world. So asking them for their guidance or their input or their thoughts on how they deal with an issue. I learned early on, I used to be active in AFP as you are now, Craig. I was actually former president, the New York chapter. And one of the, seminars I went to, I said, when you ask for money, you get, when you ask for money, you get guidance, or you get suggestions. But when you ask for advice, or you ask for money, you get advice. When you ask for advice, many times it will lead to money, because now they're invested in the advice they're giving you, making it come to fruition.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's you referenced yourself as a former president of the AFP New York City chapter, and it reminded me like how nice it is that I can now say the same thing. My term just ended, so it's nice to be the former president. Right. Well, this has been really, really just so enjoyed this. So let me just sort of just as we wrap up here, what's something that you're still learning?
Chairman of our board, the former chairman of the board, he said, don't go by the golden rule, which is treat people the way you want to be treated. Go by the platinum rule. Treat people the way they want to be treated. So really understanding what's their motivation, what inspires them. And, it's not the Vince Lombardi way of management, where they said he treats us all the same, like dogs or something like that. Where you really have to adapt to individuals and getting the most out of them, because as I said earlier, everything you want to get done is going to get done through people. And many times they will take an idea and take it to a much further place than you could have ever imagined. So working with folks is something I'm still learning. I'm still trying to get better at, and remaining curious and really learning from others just as much.
Excellent. Well, really, William, I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the opportunity we've had to work with SEO. But thank you for sharing your perspective, your experience. Thanks to everyone listening to Bigger Possibilities. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with others in the sector. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Craig. Take care now.